It's hard to look anywhere on the internet right now and not see conflict. Why can't we stop yelling at each other? One reason has to do with competition for scarce resources. Back in the agrarian age, land was a scarce resource and people fought over land. Over time, as we developed technology, we began to produce way more food on the same amount of land, so land became less scarce. We transitioned to the industrial age. Power now accrued to factory owners, railroad tycoons, oil barons, and shipping magnates, people who fought to make stuff and get it to you. Today, as we transition to the information age, technology is again changing the nature of scarcity. Larger and larger factories produce limitless amounts of stuff, while many of our physical goods have been replaced with digital goods that are sent and copied for free. From movies and music to books and toys, we're drowning in content. Power now accrues to those that control which goods and services you consume. In the information age, attention is the new scarce resource. 30 years ago, most of the largest companies manufactured stuff. Today, most of the largest companies manufacture attention. I may be overgeneralizing here, but hope you see the analogy between attention scarcity and conflict, because attention isn't just scarce, it's finite. More attention to the news means less to Netflix, or poverty, or global warming, or your mom. This is called a zero-sum game, and in zero-sum games, more aggressive tactics win. Sex, clickbait, political controversy, violence, everyone is fighting for control of your dopamine feedback loop. How do we get out of this mess? Let's start by trying to understand how our brains got us here in the first place. Most people misunderstand evolution. They view it as a march of progress with humans at the front. This is incorrect. Evolution does not progress. Evolution pressures organisms to adapt to the demands of their environment, whatever those may be. Jellyfish and horseshoe crabs have been around 10 times longer than our monkey ancestors, but they've changed very little. For their environment, their genes got it right 500 million years ago. Humans are smart not because evolution seeks intelligence. Something pressured us to evolve big brains. In most animals, hierarchy is determined by simple games of dominance. Whoever is larger or stronger wins. In humans, hierarchy is much more complicated. It's not just about strength, it's about what everyone else thinks of you. Toolmaking is great for hunting, but it's even better for smashing in the head of that alpha male who's being a jerk. Weapons lessen the advantage of being big. They make political skill more valuable than brute strength. These kinds of social skills are cognitively expensive. You need language to tell stories that make you seem like a good ally. You need imagination to think about someone else's motives and aims. We needed big brains not to survive lions. We needed big brains to survive each other. Our intelligence evolved then, largely because of our competitive social environment, so it's no surprise that we continue to spend a massive amount of time playing status games with one another. Social competition may be a natural part of human nature. Maybe so, but what is natural is not necessarily good. One wasp lays eggs inside of spiders, so its young have a birth snack. Some primates murder infants just because they're not genetically related. Nature can be brutish and horrific, and as we'll see, winning games of social competition make us no happier. They evolved to be an endless treadmill. Maybe one of our ancestors had a mutation that made them content. They sat in their cave and felt happy all day. Let's call it the Buddha mutation. Maybe another ancestor had a mutation that made all happiness fleeting. Let's call this the treadmill mutation. As time went by, treadmill humans explored new lands. They discovered new tools, gained status, and had lots of babies. Buddha humans just sat in their cave, enjoying peace and tranquility. It's easy to see that treadmill humans would have quickly outnumbered Buddha humans, so necessarily our ancestors had more intense desires than their peers. They wanted more money, more beauty, more status, and more sex. Happiness is fleeting because it evolved to be. Fleeting happiness helped our genes spread. When Darwin proposed evolution in 1859, it became immensely popular because it fit the zeitgeist of the era. These were Britain's golden years. Optimism and progress were in the air. The idea of evolution seemed to confirm man's brilliance and inevitable self-improvement. Today, with pessimism on the rise, we may be more open to rethinking evolution as the endless treadmill that it is. And yet, while this treadmill endowed us with insatiable selfish desire, it also made us sometimes altruistic. It's common knowledge that we evolved to be tribal. Less talked about is how we evolved to cooperate. Why did we evolve to be kind to each other in the first place? Imagine two robots that copy themselves every few months. A software bug causes one of them to care about its robotic children. It keeps them safe, teaches them about the world, and makes them feel guilty for not calling home more often. Very quickly, robots that had the parental investment mutation will produce more offspring that function better and outcompete normal robots. Over time, these robots take over the world. In evolutionary psychology, this phenomenon is called kin selection, and it's why we and many other animals care about our close genetic relatives. But what about altruism towards people we're not related to? One way to study this is called the prisoner's dilemma. Picture this: you're one of two criminals in separate cells. You've just robbed a bank. The prosecutor offers each of you the same deal. Testify against your partner and go free. They get 10 years. If both of you rat, you split the sentence and each get 5 years. If neither of you rat, you both get 6 months. What should you do? Well, if they keep quiet, you should probably rat and go free. And if they rat, you should also rat and take 5 years instead of 10. Regardless of what your partner does, you're always incentivized to be selfish. In real life, we play prisoner's dilemmas all the time. We're constantly tempted to make the selfish choice at the expense of another individual or group. There are endless opportunities to steal, lie, and cheat. There's a difference, however, between the jailhouse simulation and real life. In real life, we don't just play this game once, we play it over and over again. We remember what the other person did last time and act accordingly, so there are long-term consequences to selfish behavior. Maybe the prisoners have a long future of bank robbing ahead of them, thus neither rat so they can maximize future gains. In environments where participants interact once, selfish behavior abounds. This is why the anonymity of crowds incentivizes bad behavior. It's also why the internet can be an especially vitriolic place. But in environments where people interact repeatedly, cooperation emerges. I'll scratch your back this time, if you scratch mine later. This system of intuitive morality is known as reciprocal altruism, and it's the foundation of our sense of justice. Emotions evolved to help us put this system into practice. Emotions like anger and righteous indignation evolved to protect us from freeloaders. They motivate us to punish anyone who is taking more than their fair share. Emotions like guilt and gratitude evolved to encourage our own good behavior. They make us remember when we have debts to repay. And feelings of friendship help us calibrate how much cooperative behavior we should expect from others. Should I share my food with this person? Maybe only if I'll see them again. So, although we evolved to be selfish, we also evolved to cooperate. Moral emotions helped early human groups survive. And once some groups of humans started cooperating, they likely outcompeted groups of humans which didn't. Imagine two beehives, one full of moralizing bees. Moralizing bees work for the good of the hive. They punish freeloaders, they feel guilty for not pulling their weight, they tell themselves stories that prioritize the hive over the individual. Long live the hive! Down the road is a hive of more selfish bees. They still gather honey, but they care more about autonomy. They spend less time working and more time on long flights through the garden. At the end of summer, a long, harsh winter sets in. Which hive collected more honey? Which survives? Probably the one that felt stronger feelings of groupishness, the one that evolved to be more tribal. Most bees, along with ants, are special cases in the animal kingdom. We had to evolve big brains and moral emotions to cooperate. Their mating system eliminates selfish behavior. Only queens give birth, so workers have no genetic incentive to be selfish. Because of this, they have an incredibly complex division of labor, with foragers, cleaners, nurses, and soldiers all working for the good of the hive. Fun fact, some ant colonies even have farmers that raise insects called aphids like herds of cattle. They gather and store aphid eggs in their nests during the winter, and in the spring the ants carry the eggs to plants so they can hatch and feed. The ants milk them throughout the year by stroking them with their antennae. They've domesticated aphids like we have domesticated cattle. This kind of division of labor and group-centric behavior is called ultrasociality. And it's not hard to see that human societies have ultrasocial characteristics too. We may be 90% monkey, but we're 10% bee. It's obvious that we're wired for this. From sports teams and fraternities to nation-states and religion, humanity has built so many institutions that promote collective behavior. And while our groupishness helps us cooperate, it also gives rise to conflict. The quickest path to defining what a group is to define what a group isn't. What do these robots have in common? I'm not sure, but they're definitely not those blue guys. Thankfully, we're not slaves to our evolutionary past. Humanity has created institutions and technologies that mitigate evolved behavior. Contraceptives help us rebel against our genetic drive for replication. Police and courts tame our most violent instincts. I'm optimistic that the findings of cognitive science can help us build systems that promote the benefits of tribalism while countering the negatives. To understand how we might do that, let's clear up some myths about the mind. One way to think about the mind is to divide it into two systems. One system that thinks instantaneously. These are our emotions, perceptions, and intuitions, things that come to us automatically. It's how we just know. This part of the brain is known as System 1. The other system operates more sequentially. It holds logic, language, and reasoning. We come to conclusions slowly, one step at a time. This is called System 2. Here's an example that may help. Swallow the saliva in your mouth right now. No problem, right? Now, imagine an empty glass, spit into it, and then drink it back down. Ugh. You've activated the disgust module, part of our automatic System 1. Disgust is intuitive microbiology. Once something is outside your body, it's no longer a part of you, and so open to infection. Your logical System 2 can analyze the situation. You know this feeling is irrational, but you can't help feeling it. A metaphor for remembering these systems. Imagine an elephant with a rider. The elephant is System 1. It's our automatic mode, the seat of emotion and intuition. The rider, on the other hand, is our rational, verbal System 2. The rider helps us see farther into the future. It can simulate possible events. It's what helps us communicate. When the rider evolved in the last million years or so, the elephant didn't just say, "Okay, you get control now." Instantaneous processing has run the animal kingdom for hundreds of millions of years, and these parts of the brain work pretty damn well. Because of that, they run most of our cognition. So why did rationality evolve? You may have heard of the famous studies done with split-brain patients. These are people who have had their brain hemispheres surgically separated, usually to stop seizures. As a result, experimenters were able to give information to one side of the brain while asking questions of the other. In this case, they showed commands to the right half of someone's brain like, "walk to the door," which the person kindly followed. When asked by the experimenter about this behavior, they had no awareness of the command. Instead, the verbal, left half of the brain immediately made up explanations like, "I wanted a Coke." This hints that the function of rationality may have less to do with control of ourselves than we think. We don't walk around all day thinking, move arm, pick up coffee, bring to mouth. We spend most of our time thinking about social narratives, not action narratives. What will I say? Why did I just do that? What will they think of me? So, the reason our riders evolved may have had more to do with reputation management than decision making. This makes sense, given the social origin of our big brains. Most people think they're the president of their minds, giving orders all day. More likely, our inner voice is a press secretary, blind to most of our inner workings, but skilled at making up compelling stories after the fact. The rider can sometimes override the elephant, but usually it's just along for the ride. This helps explain why you can't win an argument with someone by appealing to logic. Language and rationality evolved not to seek truth and exchange information, but to help further our social agendas. So, if you're going to change someone's mind, you need to make sure they see you as part of their tribe, and then appeal to their emotions, appeal to their elephant, not their rider. This framework of dual process thinking may help us navigate the tribalism we've been talking about. When should we trust our elephant intuitions? When to follow our rational riders? Maybe think of it like a camera. The automatic mode works well most of the time. However, sometimes you need to switch to manual mode and choose the right settings carefully. So, when you're next confronted with moral conflict, try asking yourself, is this tribal or intertribal? If tribal, maybe rely on your automatic elephant. Expressing that emotion will do some good. These emotions have helped incentivize cooperation for thousands of years. But if the conflict seems more intertribal, a fundamental difference of values, maybe you should check your intuition. Slow reasoning might be a better guide. Admittedly, it's difficult to do this. Reason is often just a slave to our emotions. Another strategy, then, is disengagement. Leave the conflict, delete social media, learn to be happier with what you have, and get off the evolutionary treadmill. While this is not appropriate in all situations, the world today could use a lot less reactivity and a lot more equanimity. We may not be able to turn ourselves into Buddha humans, but maybe we can lessen the intensity of our status seeking and turn our competitive nature towards doing good for one another. The last strategy is to broaden the tribal circle and work to expand our intuitions about what constitutes a tribe. Is it everyone in a country, all humans on Earth, or all sentient beings? As science has taught us more about the world, we've discovered that we're not so different from one another. But we're also not so different from everything else. Elephants use tools, dolphins use language, orangutans recognize themselves in mirrors. Over the centuries, much of moral progress has come from broadening the definition of which sentient beings deserve moral consideration. Slavery was abolished, women won the right to vote, gay marriage was legalized. This is not an argument for accepting all cultural practices as good. It's an argument for broadening our view of sentience and tribe. The more we focus on shared suffering, the more we have in common, and the better our moral intuitions have tended to be. So, we're selfish animals with finite attention spans running on treadmills of social competition. Thankfully, our selfishness also gives rise to things like friendship and love, but it also makes us groupish. It promotes intertribal conflict. It's sometimes easy to feel nihilistic about evolved behavior, so here's one parting thought of inspiration. It is a happy accident of nature that we evolved enough intelligence to discover the origins of our existence. Living organisms existed on Earth for 3 billion years without ever knowing why. Because of this, intelligent life may be even more special than we think. Our evolved brains make this hard to feel sometimes, but the world really has been getting better. We're just beginning to understand who we are, where we came from as a species, and how our brains work. And while we haven't yet figured out how to live sustainably and peacefully with one another, we have a great responsibility to try. Thanks so much for watching. Here are some books that cover these concepts in more detail. I highly recommend them.